Greetings! My name is Matea and I like experimenting with magic and parapsychology. In this video I want to talk about how common telepathy, precognition, extrasensory perception and stuff like that actually is. Once you start going into the rabbit hole of magical practice, parapsychology, psychical research, you start to notice that these things are actually in your everyday life and between all human conversations. For anyone interested in psychical research, you can read Dean Radin's book, Real Magic. It's a short book and it's really packed with information. It doesn't take a long time to read it. And for anyone that's interested in remote viewing, you can watch Lynn Buchanan's interviews in the channel New Thinking Aloud. That channel, New Thinking Aloud, also has a lot of different videos, interviews on parapsychology, psychical research and topics related to that. And I will also be leaving some links for psychical research papers in the description below. So how I started learning about parapsychology. I used to be an atheist before because for most of my teenage life I was surrounded by atheists. And I had a strange relationship with the supernatural phenomena. I had experienced some things as a child, but since I was surrounded mostly by atheists, I had a hard time believing it was real, even though I really wanted to believe it was real. I had a sense it was real, but it was difficult for me to believe because the predominant materialist paradigm, which is dominant in science, does not agree with these kinds of things. In the past, I've had experiences with ghosts of pets in my house, precognitive and even shared dreams. So my experiences suggested the existence of supernatural phenomena. It's not I put it in quotations because it's not supernatural, it's just natural stuff. But at the time I did not understand it, so my rational mind could not wrap its head around it. Before I've learned about the word parapsychology, I've had a hard time believing those memories, because when time passes, memories start to fade away and you have a hard time trusting them. But after I've learned about the word parapsychology in a class within my philosophy group, I started thinking about it differently. I still used to believe that those phenomena was rare, extremely rare, but I now had an idea what they could be. Learning about parapsychology made me realize that I was conditioned by materialism to believe that all of my mental and emotional activity was just in my head. So after learning that you could look at these things differently, I started experimenting with telepathy and other sorts of extrasensory perception stuff. Thinking that our thoughts and feelings are all just in our head is not a commonly spread belief around other cultures in the world. The Mind and Spirit Project, led by Tanya Marie Lacherman, is a great book to read if you want to learn about how other cultures perceive mind, thinking, feeling and stuff like that, for anyone who's interested in that. So how I started experimenting with these things. At first, I was really annoying. I would tell people what they were feeling without looking at their faces or their body language. That was just weird and unpleasant to experience, so I realized that I could do this with my friends who consented and who were honest at telling me what they were actually feeling. While doing these little experiments, I would tell my friends on the text message what they were feeling or maybe experiencing, and they would either confirm or deny. And most of the time I was accurate in perceiving the feeling. Most of the time I would also be accurate in describing the feeling, but sometimes my description would be off, even though the feeling was correct. I just did not have the context to explain what exactly the person was feeling. But as long as the person was honest, I was able to see where I was making mistakes, or if I was actually perceiving something or thinking that I was perceiving something. Then I started to experiment with picking up thoughts. At this time I wasn't being creepy because I've asked some of my friends to cooperate with me, and they were happy to do that. The first time I tried to experiment with this was with one of my friends, and we both had this idea that we could try experimenting with telepathy. So we started with repeating the same word over and over and over again in our minds, and the other person would try to pick up on the word and say which word it is. And we were both quite successful in picking up on other people's words. It just took a bit of time and a lot of concentration. We also tried this with images, but we weren't so successful at reading images. We only saw which colors were present in the image. With other friends, I tried to pick up on the movement of thoughts. So I would tell a friend to think about anything, do anything in their mind, sing, recite something, repeat a word, visualize something, meditate, anything, and I would pick up on the movement of thoughts. With most of my friends, I was quite successful at picking up the movement of thoughts, but I could never see the context. For example, I tried to do this with a friend and I told him to do anything in his head, and I perceived talking and talking and talking. I was perceiving blah 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 blah. And when I told him that he was talking in his head, he told me that he was trying to remember a trip from France to some other country, a bicycle trip, like entire trip, everything that happened, but he could only do that by talking in his head. And then he proceeded to tell me that he rarely ever visualizes things in his head. So most of his thoughts are based on either sounds, melodies, or words. When I tried this experiment with another friend, I told him to do anything in his mind, and I perceived him visualizing things. I perceived him constructing an image and adding more details to that image. The more I looked, the more I concentrated, the more I saw him creating details. I could not see the image, I could not see the details of whatever he was imagining. I just told him that he was constructing an image and putting stuff on each parts of the image and making them more vivid, but I could not see what that image was. So he told me, yes, I was correct, he was visualizing. I wasn't looking at his face, I wasn't looking at his body language, I was literally standing like this, and he was doing that in his head. So he confirmed that, but he assumed that everyone does it in his head because he's a visual type. Not everyone does this. After many of these experiments and after many podcasts about parapsychology, I've started to notice how normal these things actually are in everyday conversations and with people. And even in awkward silences. But it all depends on how connected you are to the person in that moment and how transparent the person wants their thoughts to be. This does not mean that you have to know the person for a very long time. It just means that in that particular moment when you're talking to a person and an awkward silence appears, you can be connected by the topic alone and you can perceive what the person wants to say and is thinking about but cannot express it. That's telepathy. You do not see it through their body language, you actually see an image in your head that resembles the image that they are seeing. Also, precognition is quite common with most people. We just call it intuition, along with many other things that are called intuition. But precognition is experienced by most people. After learning about these things and experiencing them and experimenting with them over and over again, you begin to shut down your mental devil's advocate. The devil's advocate in your head that tells you it's all just in your head, it's all guesswork. It's all based on the context, because when you do these experiments yourself, you can remove all the factors that can contribute to either guessing or knowing the context, or seeing the person's face, reacting to their faces, or anything that can be explained with a materialist paradigm. As an exercise, I suggest that you find a friend who's open-minded and honest. They don't have to believe either that parapsychology is real or is it not real. It doesn't depend on beliefs precisely. It mostly depends on how open-minded you both are in the situation. So you have to have this whatever happens type of mentality. Anything could be real, we just don't know. You just have to be open and honest when going in this experiment. And first thing that I think is the most easy to do is to try to, if you're a visual type, try to visualize a color, and the other person has to pick up on it. And then you switch positions. So the first person that was visualizing now starts to perceive the other person visualizing another color. And then you describe what you're seeing. Another exercise that you can do if you're more of an auditory type, you can try the same thing that I did. Repeat one word in your mind over and over again, and the other person has to pick up on it. If you're unsuccessful in either of these experiments, try literally changing a friend. Maybe your friend is not completely honest or completely open-minded. Maybe you are not completely open to these experiences, which is not bad. You can do it in another time. But all these factors contribute in the success of an experiment like this. Anyway, telepathy, precognition, extrasensory perception, all these parapsychological things are not rare. They're not something that only special, rare people experience. This is something common amongst all humans. We've just been conditioned to think that all of our thoughts and feelings are in our brain. It's a learned way of thinking. It's how we're used to thinking and perceiving the world. We can change that anytime. So thank you, people, for watching this video, and I'll probably see you in another video.